In this video, we're going to see an example of piece activation via line clearance from a game of the current world champion Liren, played in 2011 at the Aeroflot Open against Italian Grandmaster Daniele Vocaturo. And here is our position. Let me describe it to you a little bit, what we have in front of us. So white's main advantage here is a space advantage, which we can tell by the fact that he has this pawn crossed to black side of the board, plus an additional 3 pawns backing that up on the 4th rank. And obviously white just has a lot more space to maneuver than black, who is relegated basically to the back 3 ranks. The one negative about white's position is certainly this backwards pawn on e4, which seemingly cannot advance, right? Because e5 is a very well controlled square by black. And of course, the pawn is kind of in the way of the bishop having an open diagonal or the knight going anywhere. So black is going to try to play a dark square strategy where his knight is going to go there. He's going to occupy the e5 square with a piece or a pawn. And for example, if white plays slowly with something like rook f2, intending to double, then black will play knight to e5 and actually take with the f pawn. And even though white gets control of the f file, it's actually pretty difficult to use because he's only got the queen and the rook really combat ready here, right? The knight and the bishop are just not very good. I guess what I would think about doing for white would be at least trying to get the bishop here, making it a little bit harder for black to develop. But I think that black can still play this move. And, we're just getting down to pretty little material. And black wants to, move the queen back and, let's say, trade more pieces on the f file, and then his space disadvantage won't matter so much. Obviously, the knight is terrible here, and it cannot move anywhere because of the checkmate on f8. But I think eventually black will be able to untangle because this knight is far from the action and can't really come to the king side in time. And every time you try to go forward, you just get kicks away with the a pawn. So if you go here, I can just come back, and next, I'll try to play rook f8. So that's how things can work out if white doesn't find a clear plan and tries to play it slowly. But Ding found a very beautiful idea based on giving up the most worthless thing in his position, which is the e4 pawn. So he just pushed it anyway to e5, even though it can be captured in 3 different ways. It's always hard to give up material, but it's a little easier to give up material that, is not really making your position beautiful. Now your knight and bishop are getting more scope, and potentially also the rook and a1. So it's not really that big of a price to pay. So let's look at some specific ways this pawn can get captured. If you take with the f pawn, the idea is definitely knight g5, and black is facing big threats on the f file and on against the h7 pawn. So that's probably like the worst way to capture the pawn. Yeah, if you try to use the knight to defend, it's not much of a defender, right? Like, you got to consider that it just gets eliminated, and white will break through and mate you like that. So that's not how black's going to capture. Now, with the d pawn, looks a bit better, but now white has this pawn sacrifice. So actually a 2-pawn sacrifice. If you don't take this pawn, then, the knight is just planning to come in, go to e7. And so if you take it, the rook comes in, and then the queen has a bunch of squares, but depending on where she goes, you're either coming in with tempo with your knight or with some tempo with your bishop. So for example, if she goes here, you can bring in your bishop, threatening to win the queen. And then there's even this cool idea of knight h4 and threatening a sack on g6. So You can actually see in this position like how vastly white has activated their pieces in just a few moves. Like every piece has so much energy now, right? There's just no poor pieces remaining in white's position. Okay, so let's go back. And black took with the knight. Kind of makes sense. Trade off some pieces, open up the bishop. And after knight takes, black again has a choice. So the problem with the f pawn is that, again, the white pieces will be using the f file. And there's just an overload of attackers, really. Like knight f6 is coming. So when you try this move, then we come in from g5. We're threatening rook f7. And on knight f6, there's a lot of ways that white can break through. I mean, of course, you need to calculate rook takes f6. That's a big one. But there's also knight takes h7. There's also bishop g6 is probably the simplest of all, because you're basically winning these two pawns and then you're winning the knight. And you're not actually only winning the knight, like you're going to win even the d6 pawn as a bonus. So you're going to have like a completely winning endgame at the end of that. The other way to capture is with the d pawn. And here there is quite a nice line. It's just one sample line I kind of went through with the computer. So I think it goes something like, let's say, rook a d1 or knight e4. I mean, you can, you're threatening to go d6, basically. They go, let's say, here. We go here. So again, pushing that pawn is the big threat. And if they try to blockade you, and it looks like they've succeeded and, you know, kind of close to defending, well, we land the sacrifice, which is an obvious sacrifice to look at, but it's not completely obvious that it actually wins, because how do you win from this position? But then you add in the pawn, and there's this one cool line, like here, you can't block with the queen because of the rook. So like this. And again, I don't know, maybe black is surviving, but no. We throw in that. And in the end is this beautiful rook lift, rook d2. And you got to go to d2, not d3, because you need to be protected. After they play queen g7, you have to be able to play rook g2, blocking the check and pinning their queen. So basically, white is, you know, down a bishop, but rook g2 is a huge threat, so white wins. Okay, that's one sample line for how things can go. In the game, he took with the queen, and Ding simply brought in his rook. So queen d4, king g2. Well, let's see what kind of threats white has here. I mean, a big one is rook e7. They'll have to do something like that. Then you can trade with them. Well, first of all, h7 will often hang there. You know, then there's knight e4 that can happen. So yeah, I would say that rook e7 is certainly the big thing that white has coming in this position. Black played f5. So they were trying to use their queen to kind of defend the king side. Makes sense. Rook f4 happened. And yeah, I think the problem with queen f6, which generally you would like to do to bring the queen back to safety, the problem with that is knight e4, using the pin and basically getting the knight to g5. Yeah, that's going to be quite deadly. Like, I think at that point, even if they take this pawn, I'm not even sure we care about the bishop very much. In fact, I feel like his life can be sacrificed here for the good of the position. And knight g5 looks like it's going to be quite satisfactory as black runs out of checks and has his queen under attack and checkmate threatened. So yeah, black was not able to go back. And instead he went queen d2, rook e2. And I guess he was feeling so desperate here that he just sacked the queen for a rook, which is clearly not going to be enough. Let's try to figure out why he was so desperate. I mean, his only other move is queen c1. Well, I'm thinking it's got to have something to do with rook e7. But no, hold on. I'm looking at my candidate moves. Look at that, guys. That's important. And I realize, hey, there's this one. That's pretty cool. Isn't it fun to put your pieces on attack squares? And they actually can't even take you because rook f8 is a discovered attack on the queen. So you go here and you are threatening the all terrible threat of knight to g5 with mate. Yeah, that feels pretty bad. That feels like black is not going to survive that knight entry. You know, what's funny is, yeah, I mean, there's really not much you can do. Like, you can move the rook, and I can go here. But even when I blunder my rook here, like, I'm still mating you. Right, so that's powerful. Yeah, that's actually knight e4, bringing in new pieces, that's the way to go. And of course, yeah, the rook should just stay here defending the bishop. So yeah, at this point, the black queen was just in too much trouble. Black was playing the game without two pieces developed, and that's why he's losing. And white has just too much attacking power, and that's what prompted black to desperately sack the queen and try to get a couple of pawns, but he only has a rook and a few pawns. So it wasn't enough, and Ding was able to win pretty handily. I guess there were like a little bit of tricks coming, but it all feels like pretty desperate, actually. Okay. We're close to getting checkmate. And he finally resigned. I mean, I guess bishop g8 is a move, but there's a mate in 2 with queen h6. And that's it. Knight g7. Queen takes g7. What's the takeaway, guys, from this example? Well, it's definitely to be alert for potential piece activation ideas, to kind of be aware of what is standing in the way of your piece's activity, what is hindering it, right? And sometimes it's your own material. And that means that, you know, you need to think about some line clearance sacrifices. You see how you can give up 1 pawn, 2 pawns, but if you're getting like a rook, bishop, and knight to have that much power, then it's definitely worth it.